Consciousness returned reluctantly, like a student being dragged back to school after summer break. The first thing I noticed was a sound, a cheerful, chirping, borderline smug noise. Birds. Not the crows from my backyard, but refined, sophisticated birds that sounded like they were rehearsing for an opera. Then came the smell. It crept into my brain like a fox into a henhouse, gentle, but with consequences. Coffee, freshly brewed, strong, and definitely not mine. I opened my eyes slowly. The ceiling was white, with old plaster or maybe decorative molding. Hard to tell. A painting on the wall showed a little boy holding a baguette with the solemn expression of a retired philosopher. Definitely not my place. In my apartment, the walls are decorated with discount wallpaper and the occasional mystery stain. My head throbbed. The back of my skull pulsed like someone inside was banging a spoon against a saucepan trying to escape. I sat up, carefully, cautiously, as if the wrong move might spill reality. The room was clean, unfamiliar. White walls, wooden floor, a window view of cobbled street, and a woman walking a dog that looked capable of judging my life choices with glance. A cup of coffee sat on the nightstand. Still hot, recently poured. Someone had prepared for my awakening or was watching. I fumbled through my pockets. Phone? Present. Locked in French. Great. I pressed a button. Entrez le code. I had no idea what the code was. Not my phone. Perfect. Wallet? Gone. Passport? Also gone. My clothes were mine, but the bag wasn't. Inside, a plastic flamingo, a vineyard map, and half a baguette. I felt like I'd lost a very peculiar game of French Monopoly. I tried to stand. I succeeded, then promptly slipped and hit the floor like a sack of bilingual regret. Somewhere in the process, I lost both a pillow and what remained of my dignity. Then came the knock. Just one. Soft. But to me, it sounded like destiny punching a gong. I scrambled up. Hello? Who's there? No answer. I opened the door. Empty hallway. On the floor, an envelope. White, clean, with a neat label. Poor toy. French. I knew just enough to order a croissant and accidentally insult a waiter. But this I understood. For you? Inside, a handwritten note. Merci pour hier soir. Tu étais incroyable. See. Translation. Thank you for last night. You were incredible. See. My heart dropped. Who was C? What did she mean by incredible? Why did this feel like I was living inside an indie film that wins awards, but no one actually gets? I scanned the room again. Too tidy. Like an Airbnb curated by someone with a design diploma and too much free time. On the table, a guidebook to Lyon. Wait, Lyon? My plan had been to travel to Lisbon. Street Theater Festival. Port wine. Maximum inspiration. But the map said Lyon. France. An entirely different country. I returned to the phone. Still locked. The only app available from the lock screen. The camera. I opened it. Last photos. Me. With an unfamiliar woman. Hugging by a fountain, laughing. I was wearing a straw hat. A t-shirt that said Vive le vin. My face screamed happy and clueless in equal measure. Next photo. Me dancing with a French flag. Next. Me under a table, hugging a wine bottle. I looked in the mirror. I looked like scrambled eggs that forgot to hatch. Summary. I'm in a foreign country. Without a passport. Without a working phone. With partial memory loss. A thank you note from someone named C. And I apparently had a very good evening. Panic? Logical. Scream? Reasonable. Call mom? Tried. Phone's locked. Also, what would I even say? Hi, Mom. I might have been incredible last night in France. Thoughts. I laced my sneakers, stuffed some courage into my jacket pocket, and stepped out into the unknown. My mission: find my passport, find myself, and hopefully find breakfast. The fridge, as it turned out, was less of a kitchen appliance and more of a philosopher. At least, that's how I justified opening it at 7 a.m. in a stranger's apartment in a country I hadn't planned to be in. Inside were the basics. 2 baguettes. A triangle of cheese with mold on purpose. A glass jar labeled Confiture de Figs. If this wasn't France, it was a very convincing simulation. A very smug simulation. Next to the fridge sat a small notepad with scribbles in French and a doodle of a smiling snail. I stared at it as if it might reveal some kind of hidden narrative. No dice. Just the word epicerie, underlined 3 times. Grocery store? Code name? Secret meeting location? I turned back to the note from last night. Merci pour hier soir. 2 étais incroyable. Thank you for last night. You were incredible. I was either a rom-com or a cautionary tale. Feeling bold, I stepped outside. First impressions of the street. Stone pavement. People riding bicycles with baskets. A man walking a goose. Not a dog. A literal goose. This was either France or a hallucination caused by cheese. Across the street, a boulangerie. The smell was divine, buttery, warm, criminally welcoming. I walked in. The woman behind the counter looked at me like I was either lost or had wandered in from a time machine. Bonjour, I said, trying not to sound like an imposter. She responded instantly in rapid-fire French. Encore en rue sans-papiers? Did she just say, another Russian without papers? Ah oui? I replied hesitantly. Gee, sweet tres perdu. She sighed, as if this happened every Thursday. She handed me a croissant and motioned toward a small bench by the window. Sit, eat, then think. I sat. I ate. I thought. Turns out I wasn't the first paperless Russian she'd seen this week. Apparently. Lyon had become some sort of accidental hotspot for lost tourists, confused Erasmus students, and one particularly dramatic yoga instructor who arrived claiming to be reincarnated Napoleon. The baker, Madame Berard, as her name tag suggested, had adopted a practical philosophy. If they look confused and hungry, feed them. If they speak French badly, give them espresso. I fit both categories. As I finished the croissant, she pointed to a notice board near the door. A faded poster showed a local bar called Le Chat Disparu, the Vanished Cat. She tapped it and gave me a knowing look. That's where they all go, she said in slow, clear English. Who? The lost ones. I blinked. You mean tourists? She shrugged. You, whoever you were last night. That was cryptic, and just mysterious enough to follow. Le Chat Disparu, the Vanished Cat. A bar with that name was bound to be strange. It looked like it was designed by Salvador Dali after 3 glasses of wine and a messy breakup. A wooden sign shaped like a cat hung above the door, or half a cat, really. The back half had been worn away, like memories after a wild night. I pushed the door open. A bell jingled, not a friendly jingle, more like a sarcastic smirk in sound form. Inside, it smelled like mint alcohol and possibly disappointment. Or cheese. In France, those things overlap. Behind the counter stood a bartender. He had the kind of mustache that solved crimes in black and white films and eyes that had seen too much, or at least one tourist dancing on a table with too much enthusiasm. He looked at me, squinting. Ah, le héros de la nuit dernière. I blinked. I'm the hero? He laughed. Hier soir, tu étais un legend. Un catastrophe, mais un legend. A legend in a disaster. That's an upgrade. He pulled out his phone, tapped something, and showed me a video. Me, on a table, waving a French flag. Singing Voyage, Voyage, loudly, terribly, and with terrifying conviction. The crowd was cheering. Someone threw a rose. I caught it with my teeth, then fell. He turned off the video with the look of a father discovering his child had gone viral for the wrong reason. You came in with Claire, didn't you? I froze. Claire. The C from the note. Yes. Claire, do you know her? He nodded. Of course. She brought you here. Called you a faux écrivain. A crazy writer. Said you had the face of a novel and the soul of a comedy. Sounds like a compliment. Or a diagnosis, he shrugged. But she liked you. Something stirred in my chest. Not my stomach, my curiosity. Or maybe both. Where is she? Gone. Like always. But she left this for you. He handed me a napkin. Neat handwriting. 2 vertical responses? Sweet little chat. 19H, Parc de la Tête d'Or. Want answers? Follow the cat. 7 p.m., Park of the Golden Head. I glanced at the bar sign again. The Vanishing Cat. She left me a quest. I was in a real-life mystery. Difficulty level, French. What cat? I asked. The bartender smirked. There are many cats in this city, but only one disappears when you stop looking. Thanks, Claire. Very helpful. I left the bar with a napkin in hand, like it was a treasure map. 6:12 p.m. I had 48 minutes to get to Lyon's biggest park and find a disappearing cat, and only then did I realize this wasn't just a hangover. This was a game, and someone had started it, with me as the main character. At exactly 7 p.m., I stood at the entrance of Parc de la Tête d'Or, the Park of the Golden Head. The name sounded like a fantasy novel or a perfume for French wizards. The sun was slipping low, pouring golden light over gravel paths and lazy ducks. Joggers jogged. Lovers strolled. A child cried because his balloon had achieved escape velocity. It was normal. Too normal. And then I saw it. A paper coffee cup. Sitting on a bench near the lake. On the side, a drawing of a cat. Half a race. Lou Chat the Sparrow. Next to it, a woman in a red jacket, back turned, hair tied up, in her hand, a napkin identical to mine. I stepped closer. Claire? She didn't turn around. You're 2 minutes late. I hope you still want the truth. Faux écrivain. I froze mid-step. That voice. Calm, amused, tired in a mysterious way. Like she knew more than the plot and just hadn't told the audience yet. She stood, turned, and faced me. Claire. She looked nothing like I expected. No beret. No cigarette. No tragic eyes of someone who writes poetry to the moon. She looked normal. Ridiculously normal. Like someone who might help you pick out yogurt at the supermarket. But her smile? That smile knew everything. You really don't remember anything, do you? She asked. I shook my head slowly. Only fragments. You. Wine. A flamingo? She laughed. You stole it. From a wedding. That explained nothing and everything. Claire, who are you? She looked at me for a moment, like she was deciding whether I deserved the answer. I'm the person you followed across 2 countries, because you said you were looking for a story. You said you wanted something real. Not just a plot, but truth. So I gave you a truth you wouldn't forget. By stealing my passport? Borrowing. Temporarily. Besides, it's in your backpack. I turned, unzipped the bag. There it was. My passport. My name. My slightly confused photo. She stepped closer. You said you were tired of being the guy who wrote stories about other people. You wanted to be in one. So here you are. I blinked. Wait, you're telling me? I asked for this. Claire smiled again. You begged for it. Said you'd rather live a ridiculous story than write a boring one. Honestly, that sounded like me. She sat back down on the bench. But now we've reached a choice, mon écrivain faux. A choice? She handed me a small folded piece of paper. Inside, train leaves at 2100 hours. Platform 3. To Paris. With me. Or you can stay. Take your passport. Go back to your normal life. Write about this someday, maybe. Or not. My heart pounded like it had something to prove. And if I go with you? Claire looked up, that mysterious glint in her eyes. Then the real story begins. Platform 3. The clock read 20:58. The train stood humming like it had its own nerves. Last passengers were boarding, dragging behind them suitcases, children, and fates. I stood by the carriage door, holding a note from Claire like it was a prophecy. Real stories don't start in comfort. They start with a step into the unknown. Inside the train, she sat by the window. Did she see me? No idea. Maybe she did and pretended not to. Maybe that was part of the test. I stepped forward. Then again, my heart thumped like it was trying to escape and buy a ticket of its own. And just like that, I was inside. The carriage smelled like coffee, leather, and something vaguely adventurous. I walked down the aisle, caught her eye, and the train moved. No drama. No music. It just knew. You came, she said, as if I just walked into a bakery. I'm a writer. Boring turns aren't my thing. She nodded. Then listen. She pulled out a thin envelope. Inside were old photographs, yellowed, fragile, real. See this man? A guy in his 40s. Suit, glasses, smile that could freeze a summer. My father, Claire said, he was never in my life, but he was around it, through money, through people, through secrets. The train beat on like a metronome to her story. He worked for something that doesn't officially exist. Programs with no names. Operations with no end. I found out by accident. And once I knew, I couldn't unknow. And now what? You're being followed? Claire shook her head. Not followed. Watched. Because I found something. He left clues. Unintentionally. He thought no one would ever put them together. But you did. She nodded. And now, so did you. I just woke up with no passport and a hangover. She smiled. Exactly. That made you the safest person I could bring in. No ties. No suspicions. You became a clean page. And now you're in the story. A pause. Inside, something sank. I had been used. Cast in a story I didn't audition for. Why me? Claire looked out the window. Lights flickered past like memories you try not to remember. Because you asked for a real story. You wanted truth, not fiction. So you gave me espionage? I gave you a chance, she said. And you took it. She passed me a tiny black USB stick. Everything is on here. What he left behind. What they want. What they'll do anything to erase. Who's eh? She didn't answer. Just stared out the window. Are they in Paris? She finally turned. Already there. We'll have maybe 24 hours before they realize what we have. The flash drive felt heavier than a novel in my pocket. So what now? Claire leaned closer. Her eyes didn't blink. Now we end the chapter. Or start the next. That depends on you. The train began to slow. Paris. She stood. Are you ready? I nodded. Even if I'm not, it's too late. We stepped out into the cold air of Gare de Lyon. The city buzzed. The flash drive burned in my pocket. But there was still one thing I hadn't asked. Why me? Why this story? Why now? And maybe she knew. Maybe she'd tell me. Paris didn't sleep. It hummed, moved, whispered in every language imaginable. The city looked as if it knew too much, but wasn't going to share easily. Claire and I walked along the Seine, past lights and shadows, until we stopped at an old bridge. Here? I asked. She nodded. Beneath the bridge is the entrance to the archive. It's old, abandoned, only official on paper. We'll meet with the one who started all of this. I frowned. Who? My father. My heart skipped a beat. But you said, he's dead to the world. But not to us. He disappeared on his own terms, to hide what he had discovered. And now he's waiting. But not for me. For you. Me! She nodded. He knew that sooner or later someone would reach this point. Not an agent. Not a spy. A storyteller. Someone who knows how to look beneath the words. I wanted to laugh. Or run. Or wake up already. But it was too late. The story wouldn't let go. The basement smelled of dampness, metal, and secrets. We descended the stairs, passing old pipes, until we reached the door. A metal one, with a code lock. Claire entered 6 digits. 180421. The day you woke up without a passport. The day it all began. The door opened. Inside there was a man. Gray-haired. Stern. He had the same eyes as Claire. He looked at me, and I suddenly realized he wasn't surprised. He had been waiting. You knew I would come? I asked. He nodded. Because you're not just a character. You're a carrier. The words you write, they encode data. The story you create isn't fiction. It's encrypted truth. A protocol. You've already spread part of it through stories, blogs, notes. I opened my mouth, then closed it. This was no longer a story. It was a cipher. Why? He smiled for the first time. Because in a world where everything is under control, only art remains free. And only a storyteller will be believed, even when the truth seems impossible. Claire placed a flash drive on the table. Everything else is here. The final piece. He inserted it into an old laptop. A window appeared. Password. He looked at me. You already know it. And I did. I typed _vein. The screen lit up. The data scattered like a puzzle, assembling into reports, diagrams, names. The truth, too big to be held in one place. What now? I whispered. Now you decide, he said. You can tell everything, or leave it in secret. But remember, you're not just a witness. You're the creator. 3 days later, I sat in a small cafe, back in Lyon. Claire was gone, or had vanished. On the table, a laptop, a blank document. The title, The Vanishing Cat. I started to write, not inventing, just describing what had been, or what is, or what will be. People walked by, unaware that behind them, a story, not a spy thriller, not a novel, a signal. And only I knew that the ending wasn't a period. It was a transmission.